Yeah. So, good morning, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to all of you. And I'm sure you would have attended the previous sessions in which a lot of interactions would have gone in. So, firstly, I would like to introduce myself. That was what is expected always, to want to know each other well as we go along. So, I'm Professor Geeta Sinha. A little brief about me is that I did my graduation in economics from uh, Odisha, and then after that, I did my postgraduate diploma in rural management, that is from Xavier Institute of Social Service. And after that, I did get into work, basically more of development work. So it was working with women, working with farmers, working in the area of livelihood, health, and basically when you start a career, education. So it was more of comprehensive overall development of whichever project I had chosen. So the projects were basically of UNICEF. That was for a long time. I was working for projects of UNICEF, then worked for then I did work for a couple of years with Aided Action, then had experience of working in consultancy firms as well. So while doing consultancy, I did get the opportunity to work in Maharashtra, Kolkata. So it was more of World Bank projects and DFID projects. Then you have the council, the National School for Development Council. So around those. National Development Council, that is for skills. So within that whole framework, so I have an addition of working with international organization, grassroots NGOs, and some international organization, and also in the space of consulting. In between, I did take a break and did my master's in gender and development, because I was working on a lot of issues in the sections, and then I did realize that I need to specialize in certain subjects. So that is where I went and did my another master's in gender and development from University of Sussex. Then I did a couple of other projects, and then decided to again go back and join for PhDs. So that is where I landed up in Oxford Brookes University. And for the masters, I did get my Ford fellowship over there, Ford Foundation fellowship over there. And here I did get the university fellowship to do my uh, uh, PhD. And my thesis is around, I'm still working on the thesis, and it is all around mining, and I'm looking at mining led industrialization and gender based violence, again in the tribal pockets, in the tribal communities of Odisha. So that is the area that I'm working. Besides that, I did get the opportunity while I was doing my PhD, I did get the opportunity to work with in one of the universities, that is the Regent's University in London. So I did teach for 1 year over there. And then it was in the area of international relations, international development, and looked at a bit of when it is more of the we were looking at some of European history, during that First World War, Second World War, and looking at how what impact it created. So that was the area there I was teaching. And then besides that, I also did get the opportunity to interact with those students in terms of building skills. Building skills in the sense which is important in academics is more of writing, like how do you write, how do you present. So that was an undergrad batch basically, when I for the skills, and it was all around how you write academic, writings, essay. It is not the simple essay that you got a topic and you have to just put in whatever it is there. How you build your arguments, how do you bring in your, how do you substantiate the whole topic. And if you have to, if it has to be around debate, how do you justify with points and stuff. So those kind of skills, as well as writing, as well as presentation and debate. So that was another part that I was working over there. And then and since last year, I'm working with Jindal Global University. So I'm teaching mostly the students of masters in public policy, and the students of BASSP, that is Social Sciences and Public Policy. So this is my brief background. So can we start, or you have any queries or anything? I can take that, related to work, or which is the area, and how, it's more of like, how do you land up where, what do you do? So those things will also come up as and when, and we'll keep meeting. So it is not a big issue this term, though I'm teaching 3 courses, but it will be with the students of BSSP. I'm teaching more to them, the first and the second year students. So I, in the second term, I do teach the masters in public policy. So we'll look at where we get chance, but you all are free to interact or anything, any questions you have, even not just during this period, but in your whole journey. You're open, you can interact anytime you want. We can fix or have an appointment, or you can drop in a line or mail or anything, and then we can have a discussion if you want anything. Is it okay with everyone?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
ma'am.
Perfect. I'll just upload. 1 second. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
ma'am.
Okay, perfect. So the topic for today, and it is not like I would want to give a lecture on this. More is I would be looking at more of an interaction with all of you. So when we and for today, the session is on fourth industrial revolution and policy. So when I say fourth industrial revolution, what comes into your mind? So anyone who wants to say, like, what comes into your mind? Have you heard this? What does it talk about? Uh, Anyone?
Um,
Yeah, Ankita?
Hi. Is the fourth industrial revolution is, I believe, the is more towards the age towards digitalization, and how we are moving from being a lot more digital and using a lot more technology in
Yeah,
a lot of ways than before we were. It's really entwined in our daily lives, be it AI or that is AI, artificial intelligence, or using the internet and things like that, and how it's connecting us. If
yeah,
that's correct.
yeah. Perfect. So quickly to adding on what Ankita has said, you will look at, I'll just put a slide on you can see what it talks about is the historical part and some of the features of fourth industrial revolution, all the 4 industrial revolutions that you'll see, which is the first, second, third, fourth. And there are some people have started even talking about the fifth revolution. So you can see how quick we are now. And then if you look at the major changes that has taken place, it is more in terms of mechanization and how technology has evolved over a period of time. And the stage we are into currently is referred as fourth, where we talk about digital economy, we talk about big data, we talk about the virtual world. And what we are currently doing now in teaching is again a part of it. And we can very well relate what we are doing now. So this is very much currently what we're in, and it is not anything new. It is just how to conceptualize what it is, and also looking at what goes around us. So you will see there is rise of technology all across in different spheres of life. You will see the digital there is i I think you'll have to mute your Aryaman. Yeah. Is it okay now? I think there was a noise in between. I'm so sorry about it. Yeah. So, we all are clear, and we know that what is going on, and even the interaction that we are taking now currently. addresses one of the issues when we talk about the digital platforms or the virtual world. So this is where whether you say corona has led us to do this, or for whatever reasons this was expected and this is happening. So if you look at the first industrial revolution, it talks about mechanization, it does talk about proto-industrialization, and then within which the evolution of water power, stream power, so steam power, those were taking place. Then going on to the second revolution, if you look at, it is more about mass production, assembly lines, electricity. So those were the so continuous innovations were taking place, and that is how we kept moving on in terms of mechanization to different forms of technologies that took place. Then we came into the third industrial revolution, which talks about computer and automation. And during this, you'll find we did start talking about nuclear energy, computers, rise of electronics. And then in the fourth industrial revolution, where you all and we can completely relate with it, is the digital economy, big world, internet, then virtual world. So this is where we are. Why do you think, when if you've looked at the topic, it is fourth industrial revolution and policy, why do you think this subject is very relevant, and it is linked with policy, it is linked with many other, economies, subtle changes, there are a lot of changes that are happening? And why do you think, as it is important in terms of looking at from the lenses of policy, why policy becomes important, what is its relevance, what is its potential over there? Anyone? Yeah, Prathamesh.
So I think it's more like how the resources are distributed to the general populace. You see, we look at all the industrial revolutions. The one thing which is common is ways of production.
Yeah.
The and policy is also about how, like, not just materialistic resources but all sorts of resources. It might include consultancy services and roads and everything, and how we just how, as a government or as any organization which is managing a sufficient amount of people, can deliver those resources. And industry 4.0 or the fourth industrial revolution does the same in a more advanced manner, and the next industrial revolution will do it in an even advanced manner. So I guess, yeah, so that is, I guess, why talking about industrial revolution and policy is a linking factor.
Yes, Ravitej.
Yes, adding on to what Prathamesh said, I also feel that in the last three industrial revolutions that we've seen, there has been an increase in inequalities and inequitable distribution of the said resources.
Yes.
So, in the fourth and the fifth industrial revolutions, I think the policy that we must focus on is how to reduce that gap of inequality in resource allocation distribution.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we are very right when we say, when we talk about fourth industrial revolution. So Pratnesh, you brought in the area of looking at production, what kind of production, and it is not just in terms of materialistic terms, but also other aspects of the whole, when we talk about holistic development. So looking at other factors. And Ravitej, when you brought in how the key factor, when we look at fourth industrial revolution, it is more looking at what changes it is bringing in. So it will bring in opportunities, but it will also bring in challenges. So one of the challenges which Ravitesh clearly brought in is inequality and equitable distribution as well. So somewhere we need government, we need businesses, we need people, we need us ourselves also to change at some point of time. And somewhere the whole, as a government or something, there has to be certain policies, and we'll see over in the later class, by the end we'll see what kind of policies would be expected, what changes we are doing, and how we all are preparing ourselves, whether it is government, you, I, or as a society as a whole, how we are changing. So we'll also look at some of that, and I'll bring in examples to discuss that. And then, so we all are aware of this. And then if you know Siskwa, you know that he's the father of, they call fourth industrial revolution. And what he has described it as range of new technologies that are fusing the physical, digital, and the biological worlds and impacting all disciplines, economies, and industries. So, as Pratmesh, you mentioned, it is not just one thing that is being affected, but holistically, if we look at, it's everything that gets impacted. It has implications on everything, on economies, on societies, on lives, on government, on businesses, on people. And then there's a study by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which did an analysis, and it did try to bring in 10 emerging 4IR technologies for the Earth. And it is around different areas. I will not get into these very specifically as this, but I'm telling there's a report. And if you want the link of the report, the end or anyone, if you want in detail, I would share that report. You can go through that. So it has tried to identify the different areas or where we need to or which are emerging. So it could be advanced materials, cloud technology, autonomous vehicles, include even within which they have included the drones, and then synthetic biology, virtual and augmented reality, artificial intelligence, robots. And did you all get a chance? I never visited that restaurant, but I did hear, I did get a chance to watch a YouTube in which you have robots serving food. So uh, anyone watched or read or anything like that?
Yes, ma'am. A friend of mine visited that restaurant.
Yeah, I heard it's in Bangalore. I don't know about
Yeah, it's in
other.
Bangalore.
Yeah, it's in Bangalore, I heard. And I watched it on YouTube, and it was very interesting to see how they were giving orders and that was being placed. So if you all get chance, do see how things are evolving and how it is being put into service. So it will help you to, substantiate your learnings, enhance your knowledge as well. And then, to all these areas that has been identified, what becomes important is a response and the pace with which you want to address that. So it's again a study which is done by the PricewaterhouseCoopers. In the same report, they have tried to mention what are the innovation pathways to scale, because it has to be scaled up. And then, see, here comes the point where the governance and policy to address the unintended environment and social consequences of change. So you'll look at, there are different subsections it talks about. And then it also talks about unlocking and scaling 4IR innovations that maximize progress towards SDGs. So at the back of the mind, when we are talking about inequalities, somewhere when we discuss about policy, and since you all will be doing masters in public policy, always keep in mind whatever subject, whatever area specifically, somewhere we all know that we have to address sustainable development goals and all the 17 sustainable development goals. So while doing this, while you are analyzing or while you're leading or while you're having an in-depth knowledge about everything, see how it addresses that, whether it tries to bridge the gap or it creates a gap. So we need to look whether you are looking at in the context, and the context could vary. The context could be regional context, it could be a global context, or it could also be a national context. So it becomes very important to look at when we are talking about 4IR. For us also, it becomes very important to look at how it will address sustainable development goals. So are the ways or the technologies that will be there, will it create issues, around environment or other social disruptions, or it will create sustainable processes of creating those services. There's a documentary by them which I want you all to watch. It is not a long one. Let me just see if I can. In the meantime, any questions, anything you want to ask, or any points you have? I would want all of you to respond, interact, whatever ideas you have. I don't know why it is not allowing me to play this video. 1 second. Okay, I'm skipping this now. We'll see if, at the end if we can come to it. It talks about how digital changes are taking place and how we need to address those. So it was a small documentary. So we'll have a look on that. And then this is another, if in detail, if you want to look at what 4IR does and what are the changes taking place, how it is, its implications on businesses, its implications on government, its implications on society. So there are different studies, there are a lot of information on World Economic Forum. So I would suggest those interested, if you want, do have a look at this website, which is www World Economic Forum, WEF. So go through that site and you will get a lot of information from this site. Looking at this figure, what does it talk about? What can, like, first thing when you see, what does it say? It has tried to bring in a lot of aspects under one pictorial representation. What is it talking about? The inner circle, the outer circle? Anyone?
Is
Ankita,
it the
yeah?
use of is it the use of technology in every aspect of our life? Because there is taxation, and I have worked in EVA and US tax, so I know the fact that there has been a lot of utilization of tax. Utilization of technology in tax, and then there are other things as well, like 5G and design and behavioral economics and science. So I think it's how different subjects or different factors of our life, how we can use technology and how we can enhance our systems.
Yeah. So adding on to what you've said, if you look at the internal circle, the inner circle, it
Ma'am,
talks up. Yeah.
ma'am, I was just thinking, I
Yeah.
believe the inner circle talks about what
Yeah.
it actually means, the ethics and
Yeah.
identity,
Yeah.
the agency and the trust, and the outer circle talks about how we should respond to that particular situation that's
Yeah.
given.
So it's what it has done, it has broken down each aspect. If you look at, these are the major aspects they're looking. For example, if changes take place, there would be demanding new skills, right? So when it talks about demanding new skills, it does also tell you which are the areas in which skills would be needed, the expertise or the added skills or the advanced skills that would be needed. So it has been very specifically added in the outer circle. So it has further broken these areas, these factors which they have identified. For example, if it is in terms of, if I take what you have said in terms of ethics and identity, so this, it does talk about which are the areas in which we need to further enhance, which are the areas which we need to work, which are the areas in which we need to focus. And it is in terms of not just doing business, but also when you're framing policies, there would be certain, when regulatory bodies, they have to look in what are the aspects. For example, when we talk about, we do hear a lot of incidents of cyber security, so that is, and then we also look at, so we need to see where what comes in, and policy also needs to keep changing and see how it is for the good of the nation, people. So this is something which we all have been experiencing in some way or the other. So there is a very interesting study which again talks about how and which are the sectors that would be impacted, or the implications of those sectors would be impacted. So here we look at the least impacted ones would be the lawyers, physicians, surgeons, elementary school teachers. But most of it, if you look at which would be impacted, are loan officers, receptionists, and information clerks. So this comes more from the hospitality sector. Then you will look at in the legal sector, you will look at, it is more paralegals and legal assistants, retail, so it is more from the marketing. Then taxi drivers, if we are becoming more autonomous, we know that taxi drivers would be more impacted. So this graph gives you a range between 98% to 0.4%, in which you can see the changes that would happen and the type of jobs that would be automated. So automation would take place, and somewhere we all know that it is going to impact labor. What would happen to labor? I want to listen from all of you. What would happen to labor? For example, let us say that we all are in India, and as a policy maker, since you will be joining and you will be preparing yourself at some point of time, you would want to work in the area of policy. So we all know now that it is going to impact labor. It is impacting, and in future it is going to impact. So how would you address this? What would happen to labor? First understanding is what would happen to labor and what needs to be done. Yeah, Prathamesh.
So I think the first thing here we need to understand is that job reduction will be there initially. Now we can say, like, we can take an example of the coal energy and the solar. So if people switch to solar and conventional sources of energies, coal jobs are reduced subsequently. But we but sometimes we kind of tell ourselves that we are creating more jobs in the solar market, so it kind of balances it out. But what we don't understand is, what we sometimes miss is that solar jobs are created, but not where coal jobs are reduced. Like, there are specific communities geologically that here there are coal jobs and solar jobs. Not necessarily they are created in that particular community. So the same analogy can be, I guess, applied here. And so we will be, I think, jobs will be created in the maintenance aspect of, like, if we are automating, if we are using machines to do everything, we will need humans to maintain it. So yeah, and I think going forward, our main aim should be to bridge that gap between where the jobs are created and where the labor is, where the labor pool is. So I think I'm speaking here.
Thank you. That's one important point where you're bringing in jobs and creation of jobs, but not in the same area and the same field you're talking. Yes, Maria?
So I think as more jobs will be automated, I think there'll be a lot of involuntary unemployment. There'll be more supply of labor than and less demand of labor. So that's going to be a main problem.
What else will take place? Thank you, Mariam. That's an important point. Anyone else? Ankita, yeah.
Yes, adding to what both of them said, that we will, I think, have to upskill our labor as well. I think if one process is outdated and new processes are coming, we need to upskill our labor forces and educate them more about what is happening. Like Prathamesh spoke about solar. Solar, even if there's a lot to solar, it's not just putting those panels. You have to keep maintaining it. So I believe we will have to keep upskilling our labor, and it has to be a continuous process, and no one can be left out. So that probably might help.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyone else? Do you think in the current situation, let me put it in one more, like taking in all the 3 points, do you think also in the process when you spoke about Prathamesh and all three of you, when you mentioned, so we are looking at that somewhere there will be dead labor that will be created, that, but when we analyze that, we see this as a challenge that would be created. But on the hindsight, if we look at as an opportunity, we are seeing that like Nanjan also mentioned, Ankita mentioned, like new jobs, new skills, new potential, and other opportunities would open up. And what we need to do as a country or as policymakers or in our own society, we need to see that we are equipped with those kind of skills and expertise, so that that gap which is existing is no more as a gap, but you're using as an opportunity and working towards the progress or growth of your country or economy, or whatever you can unit you can take over here. And then just bringing in looking at just brought in few points which talks about the challenges and the opportunities, where we look at in our daily lives. If you look at to order a cab or to book a flight or buying a product, we see how easy life has become in those terms. And on the other side, if you look at transportation communication costs, also we're looking at there is a drop. Logistics and global supply chains have become more effective, and we can see at some point the cost of trade would also be diminishing in that sense. Also, very well said in the start only, when we were discussing, one of you did mention about the inequality as well. So here if you look at lot, it is possible that it would disrupt labor markets for sure, and it is also possible that there will be a lot of displacement of workers by technology, in terms of their technological will, and overall there would be creation of dead labor at some point of time. And if you look at the previous graph that we saw, it also did talk about where we are currently placed, what is happening currently, and over a period of time, what are the areas that would get impact. But somewhere also, if you look at the job market would be segregated, like somewhere it will be very low skill and low pay, and some segments you will see that it will be high skill, very if efficient people would be required, or technical people would be required, and they would be highly paid, and that would exist. But somewhere it would also create tensions, right? Because two different, it's a kind of class that would be created when we talk about rich getting richer, poorer getting poorer. So here in terms of technical terms, we'll be looking at someone with the high skill and low skill. So again with pay comes in, so there will be class of, again, those kind of labor that would be created, and it again would create social tensions. So that also needs to be kept in mind, and that also needs to be worked out, how you reduce these tensions, what interventions the government has to make so that this does not arise. So the key economic concern related to it will be more with the providers of the intellectual and the physical capital, where we talk about the innovators or the shareholders or investors, and which also we'll have to explain the rising gap in wealth between, again, those dependent on capital versus labor. So this will continue, this debate will always be on, but the interventions that has to be effective and efficient interventions has to take place. So here, from one of the studies, that is Frey and Osborne, they have done a detailed study in which they have tried to bring in what are the jobs at high risk and the future jobs. So somewhere you can see in the first column, you can see that the jobs that are at high risk and future jobs that will be created. So when we look at this, and if there has been a research that has been done, and someone asks you, you are given this report, for example, how would you address this report? What would you do? What are the changes that you would try to bring in? What is the first thing that you would do as a policymaker? Anyone? Yes, Ravitej.
This is probably only one of the things that will need to be done, but I suppose having educational institutions or having relevant educational courses in order to create such talent for such kind of jobs.
Okay.
So, for
So,
example, like computer applications, like in the year 2000, how we saw Not just a formalized education, but also like vocational training centers, so that such skills are. Yeah, that is one of the things I feel.
So by looking at this, the first thing that, yeah, Prathamesh, I'll come to his point as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I think is one thing we can do is the jobs which are at high risk, we can reduce the new when the new we can reduce a new intake for those jobs slowly and slowly. So, for example, administrative occupations and clerks and office clerks and cargo and freight agents. So we can, you know, like every financial year we can have that from the last financial year we need to take 70% less people. So the newer generation which will be coming out of age, they won't really see it as a possible career choice, so they will be required to kind of upskill themselves into their jobs which are in the future section of this table. So which is probably one of the things we can do. It will be a slow process, but it will be an efficient process.
So I'll come to you, Parnika, 1 second. So combining both the points that you, so Prathamesh, you did an analysis looking at, as a policymaker, looking at, and then deciding that the intake for high risk jobs you'll do less, and it will be more, you will more create vacancies or around for the
Promote.
future jobs. Yeah, promote that, and you would vacancies would be created. You would try to bring in those kind of interventions also in the society, so that such interventions or opportunities open up. And adding on to what Ravite said, from the policy point of view, it would be creating that skills. So on the other side, parallelly, what you would doing, okay, your intake would be less in this, and intake for the other future jobs you would enhance and promote that. On the other side, what Ravitej is doing as a practitioner, what he would be doing, he would try to create those skills, whether it is in the institutions or in the skills. So somewhere, you will try to bridge that gap in some way or the other. So holistically, if you look at, so somewhere there has to be some policy which will allow you to do this. For example, if as Ravitesh said, if I have to do a training program on artificial intelligence, for example, so the first thing comes and I'm taking it as a starting point, and where I go. So who are those experts? How do I create that? Where is that institution? Where is that resource? Where to provide them the skills? And even to get that skills, you need n number of resources, people who would be interested in it. Some still wouldn't know like what it is and what the purpose is of that. So it is, one is the intake thing, which in action you would be doing. The other action that would be taken is how you're trying to balance that in terms of creating those skills and enhancing those skills. Yeah, Parnika, you were saying something.
Yeah, I actually wanted to just collaborate the 2 points that you have said. And we'd also need to tackle the people who are already in those jobs who are going to be out of those jobs soon as well.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
do you
yes,
make that transition a little easier for them?
yeah,
Creating vocational courses for mid-career
yes,
change.
yes, yes. So she again has added the same point, telling in basically looking at the transition route and how interventions are planned, and that person gets skill, or even if it has to be, the job is at risk and one has to leave. So what are the compensations, or anything as a policy maker, what are the things and which can be worked out for that particular economy. So challenges, while we were discussing, we did bring in the points that also came in. It was more about inequalities. We did see about a huge gap in the social tensions that would be created. But on the other side, it also talks about how it would also be globally integrated, and there would be opportunity for cross-cultural understanding as well as cohesiveness. I wouldn't discuss much on impact. Slowly, we'll look at how it will create an impact on business. it would create some of the business on the impact that it would create would be in terms of absolute separation of labor and in the process of production, then detailization, dislocation of businesses. So these are different aspects that would take place in the process. Here what I want to discuss is how it is going to impact the government. Anyone, if these changes are taking place, what impact is it going to create on government? Yes, Pernika?
I think kind of similar to like a George Orwellian society, it kind of increases the surveillance as well that happens, to, of citizens in their day to day, that they get a lot more information and it's more easily available as well for them.
Yeah, so adding to what you've said is also looking at one, the government will also have pressure, will face pressure with whatever things are happening. And then their mode of engagement with public, with businesses, and at the global level will also change over a period of time. And somewhere for government, it will become important that they also adapt, new ways of dealing with this. For example, if it's a case of international security or cyber security, so they have to adapt to those requirements, those technological requirements. So they will take initiatives or steps to address those challenges that are cropping up. So I'll not get, I'll come, I want to share some example. One second. So here there is one example. I'm just skipping those slides. It does talk in detail how it is going to impact and what government should do. If you look at a very good analysis by World Economic Forum has been done in terms of, you know, basically they have dissected each sector and have tried to look at what are the skills, abilities, and cross functional skills that would be required over a period of time. So based on the previous discussions, we would see when Pratmesh and who was the other one? Ravitej. When you brought in that people there needs to be skills development or stuff like that. So what we need to do is, while a research is available, or for example in your own country if there is no such research done, so the first thing you would want to know, your people, what skill sets they have, and then based on the mapping that you would do, you would try to see what addresses that particular market, like which is coming up with technological growth of 4IR. And then within this, you will see that this gets integrated in your course somewhere, so that, tomorrow as when you are seeking for job or looking for jobs, you will be able to bridge that gap and you can get into jobs, and you have the potential skills that are required, you have it with them, and then easily you can make it to that particular job. So here there is a one simple example just for the autonomous vehicles, in which they say what the government needs to do. So government here needs to bring in policies when it is related to autonomous vehicles. We know what is going to be take place, for example the job losses or the inequalities or whatever that is going to take place. Somewhere here in terms of policies, or you as policymaker, it becomes important to develop those policies which addresses the structural shift and distribution of effects changing employment patterns. So in various other sectors, similar examples will be there, where you will be looking at what has to be done, what policies has to be taking place, what regulations have to be framed, and those you will see that it has to be within the whole framework, and no such tension creates. For example, you would have heard a lot of in news you hear now that there are a lot of drones in Kashmir and how it is being attacked and everything. So you have to have those mechanisms and regulations in place to address if you are attacked or if there is security issues. So you have to retaliate or to that. or address those issues, not in terms of retaliation, but address to those issues. One important thing when we keep talking about skills, are you aware that we have a new national education policy? Did you
Yes.
did Okay. So as a policymaker or as a student of masters in public policy, what becomes important for you is to look at these kind of policies and look at 4IR and see how this gets related. You have to see, for example, if we have been talking about no, government has to be prepared, the government has already floated the national education policy. So as a master's student from public policy, what are the things you would be looking at in the national education policy? For example, you are a student of masters in public policy, you are, and then you get the national education policy. You are said that you analyze this policy and let us and tell us whether it is prepared for to address 4IR or not. What are the aspects you would be looking at? Yes, Pratmesh.
Um, One major aspect which I found very assuring about the national education, the new education policy was the ability to select what we want to learn. Not in the lower classes, but as we go higher, from class 9th or 10th, the policy allows for selecting subjects based on your interest, and also it has provisions for uh, technological teachings earlier in the classes. Like we are seeing that a lot. Like most of the jobs in the engineering sector right now are IT and computer science based. So, and the exact age where students should start learn coding is a debatable topic. So, but what is good about the education policy and just in correspondence with the 4IR technologies is that it at least provides avenues for the study.
So what I would like to share over here, I wouldn't dissect the whole national education policy from the lens of understanding 4IR. Why I brought this particularly over here is to understand that while you over 2 years of journey that you will have along with us in the university, and as policy students of public policy, you will also get opportunities to analyze such policies. It is not necessarily that it has to be national. In this case, this policy is relevant, so it will become important for us to analyze policies, analyze policies, frame policies. Somewhere you'll play around the whole gamut of policy. So you have to also, what you will also get the opportunity is, you will identify which are the relevant policies for you. Then you will also get opportunity to analyze, and for analysis you will have different frameworks. For example, here if you're looking at times, it would be whether it is a national education policy, or at some point of time it would be environment policy. So looking at how these are relevant today, or or redundant today, and what new changes have to come in, and if something new has been introduced, you will learn how to analyze that and see whether it is properly addressing that or not. For example, national education policy, you open and you will find, I'm just putting one point over here. So I did see that it does talk about artificial intelligence and all the latest skills, big data and everything. But somewhere within the policy, I did not find some concrete ideas or something which identified and said this is how you would be doing it, somewhere. Like for example, if uh, you are said, okay, this is the courses that has to be integrated. So where you are integrating, where are those experts or resources available? Who are those institutions? Are they new that they're going to create, some in the space of skills? For example, if you look at DGT, the skills vocational skills space, so are they equipped? From where are they going to be equipped? So those kind of nitty gritties. As policymakers, for us it becomes important to see, okay, this can be done, but how is it going to be done? What is the implementation? What are the norms to be implemented? So that also becomes important, right? It is not just something that is written on paper, but something which also will involve processes. It exists, but some things you will find that the whole framework or the design is not there, which you, I, or anyone who wants to take up will have to design, right? Yeah, Ravitej.
Yes, thank you. I would like to actually taking it further from what you were mentioning about the national education policy and how it lacks certain details that probably needed to be there. Through the course of my professional career, I have studied the national urban transport policy in
Okay,
detail,
great.
and I have noticed the same issues there as well. That the intent and purpose of the document is good and probably has quite a lot of research has gone into it. But finally, the policy is bad in law finally because it is not implementable. It talks about it talks about a situation in urban transport that is difficult to implement, for example, in the current situation in India. So the what I have noticed is that uh, policies, when they are framed in India, they are framed as something like vision document, that this is what the ideal situation is supposed to be like. I have not gone through the national education policy in total detail to be able to comment on it particularly, but I have noticed that policies in India tend to be these vision documents, and if we are able to achieve, well and good, but if not, no harm done. And that is the unfortunate part. So most of our policies are actually, we have never been able to implement it in letter and spirit.
I agree to your, because that has been my experience in a few cases. While implementing a project, or when you're working, it becomes very difficult. The vision document says, or the policy document is something, but in the ground you'll find the realities would be really harsh. Realities you would find. Yeah, if you look at in national, there would be certain critiques, but there would be certain good points as well. For example, it opens a lot of research space for innovation and stuff, which is good. And some places you'll find, okay, this specificity does not exist, so how that has to be taken. So why we are bringing, and why you need to analyze is, today, tomorrow, or any point of time, you will be in that space. So you should be good policy makers or policy implementers. While studying, or while you are just evaluating or assessing any policy, you should know the skills to analyze that. And also you should know that it should have a holistic approach to it. It should not be framed somewhere which is not, cannot be implemented, or cannot be taken to the grassroots level or to the target people. So somewhere you have to bridge that gap. So while learning, we have read loads, and if you read, there's a lot of research which also talks about that, okay, the policy in vision is too good. It says that, and if that would have been followed, you would achieve that, the target or whatever is fixed. But somewhere down the line, we see that over a period of time also, we have not been able to achieve. There comes the relevance of the relevance of masters in public policy. How you analyze, so you become the change agent, you become the change, you know how to frame policies, how to implement policies, and how to achieve whatever is written in that particular policy document. And also be ready to adapt from other, whether it is global or even from the people. And somewhere, what I would say from my personal learning is to always listen to those people, for whom you're framing the policies. Their their expectations, their needs, requirements, their desires actually should come on board, and then that should be framed. That's how I would look up in framing a policy. That is how, even if I have to look at a particular policy, so I would try to look at from those lenses, whether that can be achieved or not as just a policy document or a white paper where, or a blueprint, what what is being done, but a lot of reasoning needs to go into it, why that is being done and what the purpose it is going to, what purpose it would fulfill at the end. Any other? I would finish with this. I do have certain things in mind, but yeah, the other point which I would also bring in point is, anything when you're reading, please keep sustainability in mind, which is an important aspect and which we are committed to. We keep committing sustainable development goals, achieving those 17 sustainable development goals. So at least from a policy point of view, or being a public policy student, you should know, or you should analyze from those lenses, looking at whether whatever processes are being involved addresses sustainability or not, whether it could be environment or all the 17 goals. So try to look at those goals, what we are trying to achieve or what we are not able to achieve, or whether we are further creating that gap. Any other points anyone wants to add? How do you find this? Or any other questions you have? Yeah, Ananya.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
So I was thinking that in this context of the fourth IR and in the context of us wanting to become policy makers or policy experts, are there any specific type of digital skills and technological skills that we should also be equipped with in keeping with how things are proceeding right now? Because as you mentioned, academic writing is one such skill, but what other skills are there and how should we upskill ourselves?
Here, over 2 years of course, you will find that in each subject, in each course, you will have certain skills that would come in. For example, analytical skills. For example, if there would be courses on evaluation, so you would know how to evaluate. There would be, what I'm trying to put over here is, be aware and conscious and see what is required. So try to take that from the class itself. For example, one is academic writing, which you will always focus, and that support will be given to you. But besides that, even in the classes, for example, while you're doing say one particular X course on that, and then within that you will find different frameworks would be discussed. For example, if it is something on gender, you will get gender responsive framework over there. So different frameworks would be there. For example, if there is something on stakeholder analysis, something in terms of policy review. So there are different ways in which you will get those skills. What I'm saying, grasp those skills and try to, what I would also say is, see that you don't miss out on those chances. I wouldn't say in terms of really hard skills, but there are other classes, like for example, if students from economics or something like that, in terms of Python or others, so they would get those kind of skills as well in terms of soft skills. But here, when it comes to policy, more of looking at stakeholder analysis or evaluation and monitoring package, how you assess them. Then it's also about policy review. For example, you're given a particular environment policy, you write a review or do a review of that. So you should be able to do that, and these kind of skills will be built in the classes, who are teaching you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, Ankita.
Yes, I believe there is an emergence of the fifth industrial revolution. I haven't read much about it. It's said to be a collaboration of interactions between the humans and machines.
Yeah.
I just want to understand what is the significant difference between the fourth industrial revolution and the fifth, because both involves machines and virtual realities and changing our processes. Shouldn't it be like a combination rather than creating a new one?
It is more, I think, the much of the difference is only based on technology, which will be again on a very advanced format. So that is what you can put it in simple this thing. It is more advancing, and slowly it will come into the designs and different differentiations and things would be created. It's just a that has been initiated and people have started talking about it. And it's more about for example, if we are seeing now like people going to the space and then commercializing that. So there are many things that have started and people have started talking about it, and you will see the shift. The transition is not taking a longer time, it's more advanced, so it is going to that stage now. So it's a ongoing thing that is being discussed and is also being realized and being discussed on different platforms. Anyone else? Any questions, anything you want to discuss? It's just a yeah, Ravitej.
Yes, thank you. I actually just wanted to, go further about what Ankita was saying as to why it's fifth IR and not a part of the fourth itself. What I feel is that when the interaction between artificial intelligence and humans takes place, I am assuming at this time we are looking at that future as a paradigm shift from what has been happening in the third and fourth industrial revolution, where interactions probably used to have been for the benefit of our anyway day-to-day life, whereas I suppose when there is a interaction at that scale, it is a paradigm shift, and I suppose that is why it is a separate, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, also, I'll actually like to give an example which I think I have created right now, and you can then confirm that if this example is correct or not. So, fourth industrial revolution would be sort of like is a coffee machine, and it has and when you go to the work and you press a button, it will create the coffee that you want. And someone else comes, someone else presses the same button, it will create the coffee that